You are never alone. No, really. You are never alone. Even when you think you are, there are billions of microbes with you all the time. On your skin, in your mouth, and in your gut, helping with digestion and protecting you against diseases.
Without the gut microbiome, we cannot digest our food. In particular, fibers we cannot process without having gut bacteria. If you have a healthy gut microbiome, it prevents pathogens, so sick-making bacteria from invading our gut. And also the gut microbiome produces a lot of vitamins, for example, that we cannot produce ourselves.
But did you know that plants have a similar microbiome surrounding their roots?
The rhizosphere is the layer of soil around the roots of plants, and in this rhizosphere we see an enrichment of microorganisms compared to the soil further away from the roots. And this is showing that plants are actively enriching certain microbes in this thin layer of soil around their roots.
And there they fulfill a similar function, helping the plants to take up nutrients and fend off pathogens. So what if eating a vegetable isn't just that, but a moment where these two microbe worlds connect?
An important question that we have in this MicroHealth consortium is the question whether microbes which are present on the food that we eat, including vegetables and fruits, can also live in our gut and potentially have health benefits, where the health of the soil is reflected in the health of plants, but also reflected in human health, because we eat the plants that are derived from the soil.
Something that everybody feels in his gut as being very logical that this connection exists. But if you look in the scientific literature and look for evidence of this connection, then the evidence is very scarce and not very strong.
So this is the first time, as far as we know, that we really test this concept.
We take products, we measure their microbiome, we feed these products to humans, and then analyze the consequences on the human gut microbiome.
And we also want to go a step further and see if it's possible to actively steer plant microbiomes through farming practices.
Plants strongly respond to the kind of fertilizer that they get by recruiting different microorganisms from the soil. So if plants get a high abundance of readily available chemical fertilizer, they don't need microorganisms from the soil to help them take up these nutrients, and they will have a less rich microbiome on their roots. When we supply less readily available nutrients, for example in organic fertilizer, they will recruit much more microorganisms because they need to do their best to get the nutrients out of the soil.
To test this, we created a unique experiment. We start with 4 farms, close together and with the same soil types, but with different farming practices. A high input practice, in which farmers use synthetic fertilizers and work the soil a lot, and a low input practice, in which they use organic fertilizers and minimize soil disturbance.
We want to see if the way that we grow the crops, so with low or high input, if it has an effect on the microbiome in the bulk soil, the rhizosphere soil, and the crop itself. And then we also want to see if this has an effect on the quality of the crop. So maybe they have more vitamins or more fibers that are good for us when we eat the crops. Microbes like bacteria and fungi that are in the soil, they help plants take up nutrients. So if you have the right microbes or a high diversity of microbes, we think that this will help the plant take up more nutrients, and then it becomes healthier.
Then we harvest and ship these vegetables to our next research team.
We give those to participants in the trial. These participants were invited to follow a month-long dietary intervention where they either received low input derived fruits and vegetables or high input derived fruits and vegetables. Prior to the start of the dietary intervention, we asked them what you eat and what is the source of your food. And we also took fecal samples in which we will determine the microbiome composition. And during the trials, and then at the stop, we did the same. And we want to really measure whether these crops, which are obtained from different agricultural strategies, have health benefits and can survive in the human gut.
And with these experiments, we will produce enormous amounts of data, requiring complex analysis.
chemical data of soil, metabolic data of plants, microbiome data, metagenomic data from participants of the study, and our aim would be to build this complex model and say, okay, maybe so much of nitrogen in plant explains this number of variants in human microbiome. In ideal case, that's what we would like to find, to develop and have it as a knowledge.
The interdisciplinary nature of the research also gives us a unique opportunity to zoom out a bit and to analyze society's response to these new academic concepts.
From my view as a sociologist, I see how the microbiome is becoming a new site for health intervention. There are not a lot of norms created around it yet, and the same goes for knowledge. So that's why it's really interesting to see how scientific knowledge, which is created in institutions, flows to the everyday life, like to the consumers and to citizens. I think having all these research teams together really provides a unique opportunity to study this phenomenon of the microbiome as it unfolds in practice right in front of us, to follow this flow of knowledge and to really grasp when norms are created around health and food and what it means to be healthy in the end.
And throughout all this research, we hope to convey one thing: connectedness.
To me, the most important outcome of this for society would be the realization that it's really important how we take care of our soil, and that in the end it can beneficially but potentially also negatively impact human health.
So if we take care of the soil and we have a healthier soil, in the end this will also benefit us because our health will also improve.